I'm Laura Donna Carson, and I'm a professor of public policy here at California Lutheran University. Your instructor invited me to guest lecture today because I have a very strong interest in client communication. I have an undergraduate degree in linguistics from UCLA, and in addition, I was a human resource manager for 10 years, and I used a lot of these client communication ideas extensively in my professional practice. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about client communication styles and how by understanding these styles you can improve your engagement with your clients. Doing that makes you a more successful practitioner. So let's see what we're going to do today. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the concept of client communication, understand the Myers-Briggs type indicator, which we're going to introduce to you in this lesson, recognize the different types of client personalities you may encounter, and apply this knowledge to fine-tune your communication style while still maintaining the authenticity of your message. Throughout this lesson, we're not suggesting in any form that you should not be exactly who you are comfortable being, or that you shouldn't communicate in the way that you are the most comfortable and the most familiar with. But we are suggesting that the more you understand about communication, the better you will be able to work with a wider variety of people. The first step in fostering the relationship with your client is to know your client. You really have to understand that each person is different. In the entire universe, no two people are the same. You could have worked with hundreds of people, and by now you realize that they are all individuals, completely different. Just like everybody has a fingerprint, everybody has a different personality. And if you get to know your client, this allows you to prioritize their goals and needs. You understand their values and their beliefs and their attitudes, their dreams and their fears, what their specific circumstances are. And those circumstances are what brought them to you. So you have a really good opportunity to learn about why they're with you, and that's going to be a key to helping them. You'll find out in the beginning a little bit about their financial experience and knowledge, and it will be obvious pretty much from the beginning if they're an experienced with financial planning, or this might be their first contact with it. What we're going to focus on today is the personality and behavioral style of your client, basically their communication style. Research shows that the most powerful determinant of client relationship performance is increasing the level of each client's emotional engagement with your business. The starting point for transformation is learning the behavioral style of your client. Now, obviously, we could become PhDs in psychology, and we could have a lot of information about behavior, but we don't really have time to do that in this program. So we're going to look at some shortcuts, some methods that have been developed that have been around a really long time that you can apply very, very quickly. Two of the ideas we're going to present to you today. One is the client financial DNA concept, which was developed by Hugh Massey, and you have an article on that to read. And it really talks about client relationship performance and how people's financial DNA manifests, and especially in discussions with you about financial planning, knowing that financial DNA is going to be really helpful. And the concept is very, very straightforward. It is a registered trademark, the concept of financial DNA. Massey did put a trademark on that. And he breaks the things you need to think about down into 4 very straightforward steps. Obviously, you need to know both your and your client's personality profiles and both your and your client's communication styles. That's pretty straightforward, but it allows you to get a handle quickly on the things you need to know. He further breaks this down into the 4 primary styles of communication, okay? And according to Massey, number 1 is goal setting, which sort of translates to the big picture. Number 2 is the lifestyle desire. How is this going to be expressed? Number 3, the stability need, which is what everybody has, the need for warmth and safety. Number 4, the information need, which is a more detailed analysis. Now, while looking at this communication DNA article and understanding it, I'm going to take you back in time a little bit to the Myers-Briggs psychological preferences, because this is sort of the basis for the DNA, the financial DNA. Myers-Briggs, actually a mother and daughter in the 1940s, they started out with looking at ways to classify people's preferences and how they related to others, and actually how they related to the world. So there's only 4 levels, and everybody in the world is somewhere on the continuum of each of these areas. But amazingly, it allows a wide variety of differences to exist and a lot of cognitive functions to be explained, and it sort of helps us to divide up people in the world. Why would we want to do this? Why would we want to look at people on these different continua? Is because it's a shortcut, it's a method, and it's a way that we can pretty quickly wrap our minds around where we're the same and where we're different, where we might need to adjust our communication. When I was a human resource manager, I used this in management training. And I used it, I found out about it and brought it into the company and used it to solve problems, because I would have employees either quitting or sitting in my office crying or threatening to quit because they didn't like the way that their manager spoke to them. And I didn't have a really good way to tell the manager, look, you are communicating in such a way that it's a detriment not only to the employee but to the company, without criticizing them. And that really wasn't my point. Often the managers who struggled the most were very, very effective managers. They got things done, but they believed that their way was the only way, and either my way or the highway. And they didn't give a lot of value to others' communication styles. If the person didn't communicate just like them, they tended to devalue them. So over time, we learned that everybody's style is something that they are born with, that they have, and we can't devalue it. We can't change people. We can't turn a person who is an introvert into an extrovert, nor can we turn an extrovert into an introvert. We're going to look at each of these 4 areas, and we're going to see about how that applies to financial planning. And you're going to be able to have a takeaway and think about this when you deal with people in your practice. It's also possible that you'll want to learn more about it for yourself and find out where you are on these continua, and we'll talk to you about that as well. So the first area is thinking, feeling. And if you look at this as a continuum, everybody falls somewhere on this. There are people who are 100% thinkers and people who are 100% feelers. The continuum of thinkers tend to be more logical, scientific, quantitative. They calculate things. They very much need to be able to analyze and almost touch the results. They have to be real. Whereas feelers make decisions much more in qualitative input. They often take their feelings into account or the feelings of others. More than anything, they strive for harmony, and they like decisions in which everybody is happy. So if you have somebody who's a thinker primarily talking to somebody who's a feeler primarily, there can also often be a lot of friction. Between client and practitioner, it also makes sense to know that many financial planners are thinkers. Okay, that's one of the things that draws you to this career, is that you like to be logical and you like to make quantitative decisions. So even without knowing you, I can say there's a very high probability that you have, at least on this continuum, some probability of being a heavy thinker. Well, many of your clients may not be. So when you talk to them in your style, without reference to their style, sometimes the words are just not going to go through. And you might need to find ways to talk to them about the feeling part of the decision. Even if you have to use words about feelings and just add those words into your analysis, that can be helpful. Just admitting that feelings exist and admitting that to that person they're important. You don't have to become you can't actually. People have asked me, can I change my type? And pretty much the answer is no. A, you wouldn't want to, and B, it's changing part of your own DNA. You can become more sensitive and more receptive and more aware. And that's really the goal that we have for you in this part of the course, is for you to just acknowledge that not everybody is exactly the same. And in your practice, you may benefit long-term from being aware of these other styles. So this is a different continua, and it's the judging, perceiving continua. So people who rank high on the judging scale, very similar to thinkers, tend to be well organized and orderly, good decision makers. They like to make lists, and they enjoy the process of getting things done. Now, I'm going to just go out again and say that financial planners tend to score higher on the judging scale because they like to be well organized and orderly. They would find it very difficult to function in the financial planning world if they were not. Okay? So again, when they come across a client that's going to score high on the perceiving portion of the scale, these are people who are more spontaneous, more flexible. And unfortunately for financial planners, sometimes these people do not like to be nailed down to a specific plan. I would say that they tend to be the bane of the judging people's existence. I will also say that these people tend to marry one another. People who are judgers tend to marry people who are perceivers because it's a complementary type. But then they have a lot of arguments. So you may also see in your practice, when you see couples, you're going to see one, it could be the husband or the wife who's the judger and the other one who's the perceiver, and you're going to be in the middle of this. You are literally going to be in the middle of this like a ping pong ball being thrown back and forth. So it's good to understand it. It's good to be able to have the words to talk about these things with people. And again, you're not trying to give them a lesson, but by you knowing this yourself, you can sort of see this in action. You can see the Myers-Briggs world in action when you sit with a couple, one of who's a judger and one of who is a perceiver. You'll also find that it's very difficult for the perceiver to understand the judger, and likewise, it's very difficult for the judger to understand the perceiver. And this is one of the things that I want to talk to you about today, is that it's difficult for a judger to not judge. Okay? So if you are high on the judging scale, you meet a perceiver, and immediately the first impulse is to discount that person's style and try to change them. Okay? And you want to turn them into a more judging person. Maybe over time you're going to be able to move that needle a little bit, but I don't want you to be terribly disappointed if it doesn't happen in a week. If you give them an assignment to come back in a week with a nice list and the list comes back and it's not exactly what you look like, they're not trying. It's just something that is going to take a lot longer for them, and you're going to have to sort of walk them step by step and allow them to have some flexibility and spontaneity in their plan. If you don't build in flexibility and spontaneity a little tiny bit in their plan and it's too rigid, it's probably not going to go really well. It's just not. Another spectrum that you're probably much more familiar with because we use it all the time. We use these words sometimes without even truly understanding what they mean. We say, I'm an extrovert, or, oh, he's an introvert. Well, extroversion and introversion is a continuum. People fall somewhere on that continuum, and it means a lot of different things. But in the Myers-Briggs world, not only do extroverts tend to seek out the company of others and they tend to talk through their decisions, but that is how they get their energy. They thrive off the relationships that they have with the external world. An introvert, on the other hand, tends to think things through thoroughly, and in general, they're guarded. about their personal information. So that's going to be a really big issue for you as a financial planner if you have an introvert client who isn't going to share the information that you need with you right all up front. They might consider it too personal. Some of it's family emotional history. They're not going to want to share that with you necessarily on the first meeting. You have to assess this pretty quickly and decide how fast to move and how hard to push and in what order to ask for things, right? With an extrovert, you can get a lot out on the table in the first session. The introverts, it might take more than 1 or 2 sessions before they even tell you the heart of the matter, that the conflict or the source of pain that they have, because they need to pour through information and they are put off by fast-flowing conversations. So the interesting thing is that everybody is a mixture of all of these things, and each person's answers to this test form a unique portrait, right? So you will find people that have exactly the same high scores. It still doesn't mean they're exactly the same people, because they might have a different degree of extroversion or a different degree of sensory perception, different degree of this next category here, which is sensing and intuition. Now, this made a lot of sense to me when I learned about it. Those who score high on the sensing index, they are more comfortable with getting things done. They need concrete ideas. They need specific information. They need to be able to see something working to be confident. They live in the real world. It's almost pointless to talk to a sensor about some fantasy that you have, because they're just not going to be able to go there. Okay? Sensors are the doers of the world. Sensors are the people who build houses. Okay? Sensors are the people who basically get the country running. Without sensors, we wouldn't even have a bridge. We wouldn't have a road. We wouldn't have a building. We wouldn't have the computers that we have. The sensors are the people who do. Okay? The intuitors, on the other hand, are the dreamers. They're more comfortable with hunches and taking in information and arranging it by adding it to other ideas and coming up with a customized view of the problem. Their solution to a problem may at first strike you as impossible or improbable or unlikely. Okay? People like Steve Jobs of Apple, the former head of Apple, it was definitely a high intuitor. He would take multiple different ideas and he would put them together, and he would then use other talents that he had to get other people to make them real, right? But he loved to brainstorm, and he didn't ever reject new ideas. So intuitors can be very frustrating to work with because they don't seem grounded. They don't seem to be actually on the real world, on the planet with you sometimes. But without intuitors, we would never grow. We would never change. We would never have inventions. We would never get to where we need to be in the modern world. We would never have moved out of the Stone Age without intuitors. So don't discount these people. Again, intuitors are the bane of the sensor's existence because they talk about things that don't exist. And the sensor, if they can't see them, it doesn't exist. Again, these people tend to marry, they tend to couple. The interesting thing is that in a workplace, you often want to have both. You want to have both the sensors and the intuitors, because they do work well in pairs as long as they understand their limitations. I've always found that if you have an entire company or an entire group of people that are all one way, you don't tend to get as much going. Okay? Now, in a family, you might find that everybody's the same. But again, usually from the marriage, opposites attract. You're going to get some opposition somewhere. There might be 3 of the 4 that are the same, but there'll be an opposition somewhere. So in the family and the children, you're going to see the combinations. You're going to see, yes, some of it's just old plain genetics. Who takes after mom, who takes after dad. But it's a way of discussing those portions of our personality that come up in our communication style. Because the way that the sensor needs to be communicated with is completely different than the intuitor. If you use only data and that's all you're talking about, the intuitor may not respond as well. You may really have to plug into the intuitor's dreams and to their hopes and what they're looking for in their sometimes their reasoning for wanting to do something or not wanting to do something is not going to be clear cut. And it's going to be really frustrating for you because they're going to say, I just don't like it. It doesn't feel right to me. No, I understand what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, but it doesn't feel right. I don't want to do it. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to have to find other words and other ways to present that information and maybe allow for their hunch a little bit, even if you don't give into it 100%. Maybe you have to brainstorm with them for a while. Maybe you have to let them come up with a lot of different solutions and then back into the solution that you think is the best. If you're a high sensor, it's really important that you not pound the intuitors with my way or the highway, okay? Because sensors tend to do that. They tend to be my way or the highway type people because they are impatient and they want to get things done. And frankly, they don't have time to waste around thinking about people's hunches. If they sat around with their own hunches all day, they knew they'd never get anything done. They call intuitors wool gatherers, and intuitors call sensors bullies. Okay, so you've got to know that there's sort of a natural, between the pairs that we're talking about, there is some polarity. And in that polarity, there is tension. And in that tension is the key to unlocking some of these problems that we have in communicating.